So I watched Princess and the Frog for Black History Month. I believe it's probably the first Disney princess movie I've reviewed on my channel, though I watched a decent amount of them growing up. I always enjoyed this movie as a kid. You know, people have pointed out that it is a bit weird that the only black led uh, princess movie, the black character is just a frog for the majority of the movie. It's not the nicest thing. And, obviously the other black characters are sidelined, like her mom, because they're not as important to the plot. But I do think it does delve into a little bit of black culture, and it was nice to finally have a black princess, but we have not had one since. I mean, we had the little remake with The Mermaid that I never watched, but I don't usually watch remakes anyway. I've probably can count on one hand how many I've watched. Uh, but whatever. This movie, it was pretty fun. There's a lot of singing in this movie, which I was not a huge fan of, but the songs aren't bad by any means. I've never been a musical fan. Probably my favorite musical is Descendants, and I really only liked the first one singing wise. The other ones just had like passable songs. Um, the cast is fun, the characters are fun. Keith David plays the main villain, and he does an absolutely fantastic job. The animation is still really good, which isn't a surprise because it's a Disney movie. And you can look back at their oldest projects, like fucking Snow White, which came out in the 30s, and it still looks amazing. Um, but yeah, this was a really fun movie. It's pretty generic plot. Guy accidentally does a deal with a bad person, and then he gets somebody else wrapped into his trouble. So, they have to work it out and, change back from being frogs. And along the way, they fall in love. I mean, I didn't really care for him. He seemed like kind of a douchebag, even after he somewhat like had character development. I was not really rooting for their relationship. I did, however, really like her, and I liked all the other characters, but the prince I just was not a fan of. Um, you could not pay me to like him. I was not rooting for him in any shape or form. He's got his little butler that he's apparently been mistreating. We don't really get any details, but it was enough for him to betray him, even though he's worked for him for years. Though, he wasn't the nicest person either. Uh, Keith David has a phenomenal voice, and he does a really good job. He's got a singing part in this movie too, which he later has a singing part in, I believe, Helluva Bosch, which I've never watched. And that song went viral, and he did pretty good in that. I think Keith David's a pretty underrated actor. I've liked him in everything I've seen him in. He was really good in The Thing. He's really good here. He's really good in a lot of projects I've seen. Um, Overall, pretty good movie.